I would like to offer prayers for my brother Don, who had a fall earlier in the week. He fell, he says, up the stairs, maybe down the stairs, but he has a fractured skull and two of his vertebrae are displaced. He's currently in the hospital and extremely unhappy about that. He does have some issues with dementia, and he's quarantined for 14 days because of not having been vaccinated. So I pray for peace for him and healing.
For Don. And so it is.
I'd like to prayers for President Biden and his administration facing so many issues, and just that they make the right decisions.
And so it is.
I ask for healing and peace and justice for the Palestinians and the Israelis.
And so it is. I'd like to offer healing and peace of mind for Betty. And so it is. Continued healing and peace of mind for Clarence. And so it is.
This may sound silly, but I'd like to ask for prayers for our plumbing. We have an unknown leak. We've had plumbers out. We've looked for it. Tim's coming tomorrow to take a look. We can't find the origins. And it's problematic in this old house.
And so it is. I'd like to offer prayers for the people of the undeveloped world that are struggling still with the rampaging virus. We recall the fear and the stress that we encountered during the early days of the pandemic. And that is going on right now in many parts of the world. We see them being assisted with medical help. We see them being protected through their own practices of social distancing and masking. We see the various societies held together through the compassion and love of the individuals within those societies. And so it is.
I'd like to add a prayer for the San Marino retirement community who has a flu situation in their building, and everyone in the building is locked down again. So prayers for my dad and all the residents there for comfort and health and doing what they need to do to stay healthy and get back together again. So, San Marino.
And so it is.
I'd just like to put a prayer out there for all the people, including Janine, that are in stores that are opening up for no masking, and praying for the safety of the people working there who may be facing some issues with these choices that we're being given now. And that Janine stays safe and her other co-workers as well. And just that we all handle this opening up of normalcy, if there's such a thing, better as time goes on, and continue to get vaccinated so that we'll be protected and not have this fear, this cloud hanging over us all the time.
And so it is. And lest we forget the people of Afghanistan, the people of Somalia, the people of Iraq, the people of the various countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are beset by the conflict arising through religious perspectives and religious opinions. That each and every one in those societies, in those cultures, understand that love is the pervading energy of God, unconditional love. An imposition through conflict and stress only deters our realization of God's presence. So holding those societies in mind, embracing each and every one in those societies with this unconditional love, this energy of God that moves through us, we offer it to each and every one, the perpetrators as well as the victims of the conflict. And so it is.
I'd like to ask for prayers for Linda Carlson and her husband Jas Paul, who is from India. His family is India. His brother currently has COVID.
And so it is. And for the grandkids and son and daughter-in-law of Kay and Clarence as they are navigating the incidents of COVID in their family. Seeing them continue to recover, continue to be without ongoing issues from their infection. Seeing them healthy and vital. And so it is. Are there any other prayer requests this morning? For all of those prayers unstated, for all of those who are in need of prayer and not aware of it, for all of those that are in need of prayer and not having access to it for whatever reason. And we know that those are just self-imposed limitations, but nonetheless, we hold all of those in mind. We hold them in our hearts. We see them embraced by the love of God. We see them lifted and transformed through the active energy of this expression of unconditional love. And for this we give thanks, and together we say Amen.
Amen.
So thank you all for that. That was great energy. Doug, I understand that you have some appropriate music this morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yeah, based on the title of your talk only, I saw that, and the first tune that came to mind was a tune entitled Stairway to the Stars. Let's build a stairway to the stars. It's by Matt Malnick and Frank Signorelli. Signorelli, excuse me. 1960, Stairway to the Stars.
Well, I understand that this is on your CD. Is that right?
It is. It's on my CD, Simple Measures.
Okay. How can we get that?
You wanted me to plug it. It's
well, of course.
You can go to cdbaby.com and just type in my name, and it's the only CD I have. It'll come up.
Okay. Thank you. You know, I continue to be amazed that and very grateful that Doug has been with this community since August of 2000. Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
I hope it continues on.
Me too. Absolutely. Well, climbing the spiral staircase. Yes, it is not about spiral dynamics. That's that's another topic. But when I got into when I knowingly set my foot on the spiritual path, I had this anticipation of being able to identify what I needed to know, identify the practices I needed to practice, and make progress at a good pace to that lofty goal of enlightenment. Well, I found that spiritual journey can be exhilarating and it can be frustrating. When we make plans, God chuckles, right? Suffice it to say that my experience of the spiritual path and my expectations of the spiritual path diverged. I found out that old saying that wherever you go, there you are. And that saying actually offers a subtle clue to our progress. I'd like to read, for those of you who didn't read the newsletter this morning, I will read the parable again. I'll just read it. I think that's less time than trying to tell it. So the parable of the farmer by the highway tells of an honest farmer in an ancient times that was tending his fields by the highway upon which the travelers would trek. One day a traveler happened by. He stopped to ask the farmer, "What are the people like in the village ahead?" The farmer asked the traveler, "What are they like where you come from?" "Well, haughty, jealous of their neighbors, and stingy with their food." "Well," said the farmer, "that's what you'll find in the village up ahead." And the next day, this honest farmer was another traveler came by. going in the same direction, and the farmer again was asked, what are the people like in the village ahead? The farmer asked the new traveler the same question. What are they like where you come from? And generous to a fault. Great folks to be around and welcoming to everyone. Well, you're in luck, said the farmer. Those folks in the village ahead are just like that. And we can say wherever you go, there you are. But it also points to the idea that regardless of where we try to go, we can't escape our spiritual environment, our, if you will, the relative domain. When you think about it, regardless of what we do internally, and that, of course, is where the spiritual journey occurs, but regardless of what we do internally, the people around us, they're growing at their own pace, but they're still interacting perhaps in the same way. We can't control how they interact as much as we would like to. But this process of the spiritual journey, we continue to be immersed in that same spiritual environment that we find ourselves at the time that we say, I'm going to step on the spiritual path. And I think one of the problems we have, it certainly was with me when I started this process, knowingly started the process. So, I mean, we're on the process, we're on the spiritual journey our entire lives. Our entire time in this relative domain, we are on the spiritual journey. Whether or not we're conscious of it is another question. But when I made that conscious decision to step onto the spiritual path, I realized that, I anticipated that my journey was going to be linear, maybe a meandering path, but I would encounter things and then I'd figure out how to do it and then how to fix it and then go on. But that's not how it goes. It's really a process of a spiral. We don't leave our spiritual environment. We don't leave the relative realm. We just gain new perspectives in it. I'd like to share with you this passage from Matthew. It is indicative of our process here. And that passage is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And in the traditional Christian tradition, this passage is often interpreted that if you accept Jesus as your personal Savior, that's your hunger and thirst being answered. If you do that, then you will be fulfilled. But that's not what I think Jesus was talking about. I mean, Jesus repeatedly said that the things that I do, you can do also, but I am on this path as well as you. And so when we hunger and thirst for righteousness, we will be fulfilled if we do the work. If we do the work. It's not about relying upon something out there to save us. It's not about our encountering some magic formula that all we have to do is follow the formula, whether it's accepting Jesus as our personal Savior or the various steps of Buddhism that we encounter, or any kind of Hindu tradition, or following the Tao. Any of those paths require that we do the work. It's an internal process. It's not about what I'm doing here with the house and in painting rooms and putting in new windows and that sort of thing. It's about the internal effort that we encounter. So I would like to share with you this idea that in our attempts to move up, if you will, to enlightenment. We really have a spiral path that we take. We begin with this old consciousness, and that old consciousness may in fact be very comfortable. We may see what we do and how we are in this relative realm. We may say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that trap of inertia is something that keeps us from advancing. There's no growth involved. There's no change involved. Therefore, no growth involved. So we've lived in this perspective. We've lived with this consciousness for years, perhaps. And why change it? Well, along comes some kind of impetus. That impetus is going to, if you will, kick us out of that old consciousness. And that impetus is going to lead us then to this process of release. And this process of release is going to unburden us from that aspect that held us in that old consciousness, for which the impetus is initiating a change. And from that release, we will then transcend. We will then move to another perspective, or we'll move to another belief. We'll move to another worldview with respect to that part of the old consciousness which the impetus initiated. From the transcending, we will come to an include, where we take that which we saw as a detriment to our advance, and we include that as a perspective, as an important perspective, as an important aspect of who we are. And out of that, then, we come into a new consciousness. And so we can see that we're really coming around to the same meridian, if you will, on the staircase that we were before, but with a higher perspective, with a greater understanding, perhaps, with a more effective practice or a more effective way of being. So that process that we are going through is a process that is a growing process. It's an essential process of our moving out of old consciousness into new consciousness. So this movement along this spiritual journey is really a process in rising up, but not moving on, but rising up. So, I'll stand corrected that I've spoken of the experience of the spiritual journey, and I've somewhat discounted. I have discounted the idea that heaven is up above. Well, it turns out that heaven is up above, but only metaphorically. It's only metaphorically that heaven is above. It's up the spiral staircase. So, let me. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Hang on a second. I am coming back to us. Well, yeah. There we go. I couldn't find my control panel. Where did it go? Okay, so this process that we go through in our spiritual evolution along the spiritual path is a spiral. It's not a linear thing, but it is an elevating process. So let's take a look at each stage of that spiritual journey. In the old consciousness, we are comfortable. We have no need for change until something comes along. Let's say that we're happy in our job, and our boss calls us in on a Monday morning, first of the month, and says, David, really appreciate your time here. And I'm feeling, uh-oh, what's this conversation about? And he says, I really appreciate your time here. You put in a great deal of effort, and, it hasn't gone unnoticed. But frankly, your productivity, your output is not what we need, and so we're going to make a change. Boom! My worldview of who I am a sales rep for IBM. My worldview has just collapsed. I've identified with being a sales rep for IBM, and now who am I? What is that? What's the impetus now? The impetus is my lack of identity, right? My lack of a worldview that I've been comfortable in for several years, and all of a sudden, not only do I have to realize that I'm no longer an IBM sales rep, but I have to go and tell my wife that I'm no longer a sales rep. I remember that night when I came home from being fired by IBM I remember his name is Vic. I don't remember his last name right now. How we suppress those memories, right? But I remember coming home that night and pulling out The Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost. Tears streaming from my eyes as I saw as I read the poem and recounted my worldview being not just shaken, but destroyed by this impetus. Well, that impetus could be like a cosmic 2x4, which it was for me, or it could be a slight whisper of an insinuation of a possible different way of being. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of characteristics of that impetus. But that impetus, nonetheless, is forcing us into a stage of release. I mean, if we don't release that aspect of our old consciousness, in that case, that I am an IBM sales rep, if we don't release that old aspect of our consciousness, then we will crater. I mean, we will move into a black hole in consciousness, and we will find ourselves in depression. We will find ourselves in a situation where literally life doesn't just metaphorically fall apart, but it literally falls apart. So that impetus is a useful flag for us. And what was the flag for me? It was that I identified as an IBM sales rep. That's not who I am. I thought that was who I was, but then in reality, that's not who I am. And so it's important then that in that process of release, that in my case, I let go of this idea that I am an IBM sales rep. And part of that process of release for me was the reading of the Robert Frost poem. And so that aspect of our spiritual journey is one where we deny the power that we have held for that belief. In my case, that I'm an IBM sales rep. Well, it took me several weeks actually to release that. But there are some practices that we can use to release that. For instance, I could sit down and write about my perspective of being an IBM sales rep. what it meant to me, how I identified with that self-perception, that self-image, how it affected my life, how my life was limited by the idea that I'm an IBM sales rep. As when I was an IBM sales rep, I noticed that other sales reps that left the team, that went out and did other things, I just couldn't understand how, in one case, one sales rep became a real estate salesman. In another case, a sales rep went to work for a competitor. In a third case, the sales rep basically tried to do something very different from what he was doing. But I was having a hard time identifying what their experience was, and lo and behold, that impetus put me into a position where I fully understood what those guys were going through. It turns out that all of these were men that were in the sales team at the time, but it was 1971. So this impetus kicked me into the position where I needed to change my perception of who I was. But in so doing, that released these boundaries of who I thought I was. Took a while, took work, but at that time I didn't know the tools that I have learned since I've come into Unity. And journaling what that perspective meant to me, how it affected my life, how it limited me, taking that document that I have worked on and burning it and letting that cleansing fire dispel that idea of who I was. If I invest myself in that document, if I invest myself in that description of my old consciousness, that aspect of my old consciousness, and let the fire cleanse that aspect of myself, that is a useful tool. It's not the only tool that you can use, but it's a useful one. So once I release that aspect of self, then I have this vacuum. Well, who am I? If I'm not an IBM sales rep, who am I? And so the transcending stage is to move to a broader perspective, or a more inclusive perspective of, in my case, who I am. And that is affirming a new perspective. And we've talked about the power of denial and the power of affirmation, and an important part of that being the fourth step of our 5 pillars of faith. But affirming a new perspective is not a simple task. It's not just saying, oh, okay, I'm not an IBM sales rep, but I am a child of God. Oh, well, there, that's done. No, that's not done, because we've got a whole history, long history of, in some cases a long history, in my case it was a 3-year history, of thinking I'm an IBM sales rep. So as we transcend, as we affirm the new perspective, an empowering perspective, in my example of who I am, then we recognize that can take work. We're working with subconsciously held beliefs, and those subconsciously held beliefs persist unless we make effort to change them. And that effort to change them, through the practice of affirmations, we can create a statement of that new perspective of who I am in this case, and that then that's a created perspective, right? We're not limited in how we create that. We can create that to be anything we want. It's more empowering to create something that you can believe in. It's more empowering to see to create something that you can embrace and say yes, yes, yes. But that's still not enough. we need to impress and impress and impress our subconscious of this new perspective. So the spiritual practice, the guides that we have from various traditions of the spiritual journey, is that we need to do that multiple times. We recommend doing it 200 times in the morning, 200 times in the evening. If you construct a succinct, effective statement of who you are, an affirmation, 10 words or less, then you can do that 200 repetitions in 10 minutes or so. So you can do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, and over the course of 21 days, that new perspective of who you are will begin to take hold, and it will become part of that subconscious worldview, subconscious perspective of who you are. That then allows you to build upon that, your actions and your reactions, the way you encounter your environment and the circumstances in your environment, the relationships that you have. All of that will be based upon this new foundation that resides in the unconscious. So once we transcend, once we engage that new subconscious frame, then we include. Including is about acknowledging that that old perspective was useful, the impetus was useful, the denial was useful, the affirmation was useful. All of this is part of who we are. And we're going to talk about next week, we're going to talk about how we use this process to dissolve the boundaries that we've talked about in the past. But this process of affirming and then including becomes a very solid foundation upon which we build this new perspective, this new worldview. So we come back around. Our relationships, they are still as they, our relationships exist still. The same people are in our stage, on our stage. The same circumstances may, in fact, be there, although the impetus may have created or been created by new circumstances. But the point is that we're not saying, okay, I'm gonna chuck all this and I'm going to go over there. I'm gonna move to Fort Collins because Fort Collins that's where I'm going to go, and I know that I'm going to find enlightenment there. Well, I won't find enlightenment there unless I can find enlightenment here. So we include becoming, we embrace all of that which we have been as well as all of that which we presently are. So with each revolution, we come into this new perspective, this new consciousness, and lo and behold, we find out that there are now new things to learn, that there are new opportunities to grow, that there are new things that we need to release, and we need to transcend, and we need to include, and we come back to another level of consciousness. We are walking up this spiral staircase, and we are in each revolution, as we come back to this new level of consciousness, we have a broader, more empowering perspective of who we are. So in arriving at this new perspective, rather than being satisfied with, well, I've done all I need to do, I'm now enlightened. The old phrase, when you come into enlightenment, you realize that you still need to chop wood and carry water. That chopping wood and carrying water is recognizing that we have more work to do. So you thought coming into this spiritual path was going to be a walk in the park. Well, think again. It probably won't. So let me share with you some music that, Here we go. Yes, I know I can. I know I can. And so it is. We'll have that as our meditation today. Let's just take this brief moment and let that idea sink in. I am light. And so it is. If you'd like to make a contribution to our ministry, you can do that by going to our website, clicking the donate button. There you will find either an opportunity to fill out the online donation form, or you can and you can set up a recurring contribution through that, or you can send a check to the address that's shown on that in the donate page at livingwaterunity.org. Or you can use the first article of the newsletter, click on that, and that'll take you to the online donation page. So thank you. As we look at that, as we consider that contribution, let us hold in mind this: that divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And Doug, if you would. Together, please. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.